Your sport does not care about you. It doesn't care. I care about you. Alex cares about you, but your sport does not. Hello, everyone. This is episode 113. And today, if you didn't know, we're going to talk about how your sport does not care about you and the statement that Alex so delightfully put on his Instagram yesterday for everyone to respond to. And it seems like you've had a good response, hey, Alex?
Yes. Well, I think the first thing to bear in mind is we're going quite heavy on today's podcast, but then we will pick it up with some light-hearted stuff towards the end. But this all came about as a result of the Lazar Djukic situation at the CrossFit Games. So, just for anyone who kind of isn't really aware of the situation or kind of what's happened or the circumstances around it, Lazar Djukic, one of the elite CrossFit competitors. And then in one of the events at the CrossFit Games,
The opening event.
yeah, the opening event, which was, I believe, was at a 5K run into an 800-meter swim. Is that what it was? Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for confirming. Like, I don't know why you just look blankly at me there and make it really difficult. So yeah, 5K run into an 800-meter swim. And unfortunately, Lazar Djukic, for some reason we don't actually know yet, did not make it to the finish line. He was about 100 feet or so from
Yeah,
finishing the sprint.
they reckon he was about 30 meters from the finish, and so it was live streamed,
Yeah.
and they reckon that they found you can see him struggling 30 meters from the finish. So, with all the spectators around, obviously all the other finishers are going past him. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so obviously he didn't make it to the finish, and then say he didn't make it to the finish, he died. Like it's weird because he was on the leaderboard for the following day at the bottom of the leaderboard with a DNF next to his name, which is just like, to be honest, that is fucking terrible. Like it's not that he's just sorry, the dog's kicking. Can you hear that?
Dog agrees. The dog agrees.
So it's not just that he didn't finish, like the man's actually died. So it is quite honestly, I think, the worst thing I've actually known happen in sport. Like I know there are tragedies all the time, like accidents happen, people die, like football on a football pitch, people will have a heart attack. American football, you might get your neck broken, and there's really bad things happen. But for me, this just feels different. And
Well, it is different. I think obviously there's loads of people have got different opinions. One of the things that is clear about this is if, for example, this is a possibility, he had a heart attack 30 meters from the finish line in the pool, or he cramped up and he couldn't swim, and someone pulled him out and he was gone, that is very, very different. It's the same circumstance. He's died the same way, but it's very, very different to being fished out of the lake an hour and a half later after people have been, where the fuck is he? Where's Lazar? We've not seen Lazar. He's not finished yet. And then everyone else is kind of like, oh, well, I think we'll try and speak to this person or we'll speak to this person. Like he's gone fucking missing and they've had to get him out an hour and a half later. Like nothing was done. Like if you can see him visibly at the end of the stream and you can see him 30 meters out, it means other competitors have gone over him. Spectators have seen it. Apparently, allegedly, a lifeguard stopped someone from going to try and help. We don't know that for sure, but the facts are there was negligence involved, and he drowned with no one even having a clue.
yeah,
And I don't think it matters that it was 30 meters from the end, 30 meters from the start, somewhere in the middle. The fact is, he was out there. It's not like he was doing SAS training. Like, yeah, you expect that these people are going to be pushing hard. They are at the top 0.01% because they are willing to go to that place. They are going to push hard. Sometimes, like injuries happen in exercise, death can happen in exercise. But for death to happen and no one to have a fucking clue about it, or to even have any safety protocol in place to be helping him, like to even, I don't know, try and resuscitate or anything like that, it's a fucking shambles. It's disgusting.
yeah. I think that's the thing that is so bad about it. It's the fact that he had to be recovered 2 hours after it had happened. And it's not like it would have been bad had he drowned but been pulled out and then like immediately, and then they just failed to resuscitate him on the side. Like, that is tragic. What has happened is even further beyond that, I think. And I think, like, obviously if his
Yeah.
wife's watching, his or his partner, then he's got coaches, teammates, probably other friends and family who are all watching. And if you've got people in the crowd saying that someone's struggling and they're essentially drowning, immediately that should be right.
I
Everything
think
stops, the race stops, every effort is poured into getting the athletes out of the water and saving the person that is struggling. I'm just looking through some of the world open water swimming sort of guidelines. So whatever you were going to say, then go for it.
I was going to say he's gone missing 30 meters from the end. I was actually watching the stream, and someone must have been alerted or known around about the time that he'd gone missing. I think there'd maybe been 10, maybe 15 competitors finished. He was last seen maybe in like seventh place. I don't know if that's specific, but he was towards the front, and the stream stopped somewhere around the time when like some more people had started finishing. So that's like an hour and a half before he got like pulled out, which means someone was aware that something wasn't right. And it's the fact that this person is just unaccounted for and missing. That should not happen at the highest level in a sport where these people are there to compete. They're not there to try and survive. Like, they're there to compete. So
Yeah.
30 meters from the finish is to be missing. Like,
I think also like the structure of the event as well, like doing it in the order that they've done it, where they've done the run first, then they've gone into a swim. It's kind of doing it that way around is backwards to any sort of triathlon event or Ironman event would ever do it. Because if you get like it's in theory, you're freshest at the start. I don't even know why that's theory. Like, fact, you are fresher at the start than when you finish at the end. So if you collapse in a run, all you do is you hit the ground, someone comes running over, and then they take care of you from that point. But if you get into trouble in water, whether it's heart attack or cramp or just general fatigue, it doesn't take long, and you're underwater, and then you will be very difficult to find. So like things in that environment are going to move incredibly quickly. It's going to be incredibly hard to stay on top of it, and the risk for that happening. Obviously, this has happened to a guy. He wasn't even like at the back of the pack or the middle of the pack. You're talking about one of the event leaders who's pushed himself to that point, who is also a very competent swimmer in his own right, who has managed to, for whatever reason, to succumb to the circumstances and has paid the ultimate price. Now, if it can happen to him, it can happen to the next person and the person behind him. And like it could have, this is one of those situations where I imagine when you're planning it, you kind of think through, right, okay, we've got this event, we're going to be bold, right? We're going to really test the athletes. We want them to do a run swim combo, and it's going to be a relatively long event. So we're going to go 5K run, probably going to do that in about sub 20 minutes, I think, for the majority of these athletes. So they're going to be running it hard. It's going to be hot temperatures. They're going to be running hard. Then we want them to go straight into a swim. Swim distance is going to be 800 meters. What is the worst case scenario for this kind of event? You could argue someone claps in having a heart attack on the run, right? Okay, well, how are we going to deal with that? We'd probably have medical professionals on standby. We'd have multiple people along the course throughout that could intervene and assist with help. And then you go, okay, well, what's the next worst thing that could happen? Well, someone could have a heart attack while they're swimming. Someone could get into serious trouble in the water. So we'll put provisions in place to try and deal with that situation. So that's where you go, like lifeguards, safety craft, all that kind of stuff. And then you go, what's the next worst case scenario? And you just increase the numbers. You go, well, what if two people go under? What if two people have a heart attack and start drowning? What if it happens to three people? And when you start having to deal with it in terms of those big numbers, I think you're really, really, really struggling.
Yeah, so the following morning I spoke to Ben Aiken, obviously that you know, and the podcast listeners will know if they've listened to his as well, who does
Go
Ironmans and
check his
triathlon.
episode. We spoke to him a while ago. He's on the podcast. He's been here. We need to get him back on as well, actually.
Yeah, we do.
We could talk to him about this. This would be it'd be a good one to cover this, actually.
Yeah, he's also a professional Ironman athlete now, so we'll definitely get him on. But so I was speaking to him about the regulations and the protocols surrounding Ironmans and stuff, and he was saying there's a reason that in triathlons and things they do the swim first. And I agree with you. If you're going to be putting on a big sporting event, you would look at what regulations the experts in that specific field would do. If you had an open water swim, exactly what Alex has gone through, the regulations are you have people manning jet skis or boats or like motorboats or paddle boats and boards, which they did have, but kayaks and things like that, where you can actually pull bodies out of the water. And I mean bodies is in like alive bodies or passed out bodies, whatever. You would have a way to be able to bring people out of the water to then resuscitate, etc. And if they're doing it, then that's really what anyone at the elite level in any sport should be doing if they have a swim in their event. In terms of like the pro going, like I get why they would do it. Like they want to test to see who's the fittest. So they'll go, oh, well, we'll do it inverted. We'll CrossFit. We'll do the swim second after the run. And, I think that's just, it's unfortunate that they've done it that way and that's what's happened. But I agree. In terms of the regulations and stuff, it was just they clearly hadn't put in place what what
Go on. So we lost you for a second there, Chris. What were you saying? You were saying about
yeah, so I apologize everyone. I seem to be having internet difficulties. My point there was about checking with the experts of other sports who are like they have the best swimmers and have elite swimmers, like people who actually specialize in swimming specifically, and what their regulations would be if they were doing open water swims. And that would obviously be, boats in the water. You would have motorized boats, you would have kayaks, you would have some jet skis, people in the water with a way of bringing bodies out of the water to then be able to actually help them, as opposed to just like a life ring here or, oh, I've got a paddle board. I don't know how you would get a body onto a paddleboard without it being very, very difficult. But yeah, you would have different safety regulations, or at least some safety regulations in place that allowed people to pull people out so they can actually give them some kind of medical attention, which they did not have. They had people on paddleboards.
I think this is the bit where I kind of then came into the idea and put out the statement of like your sport doesn't care about you, because they could also seen that Fikowski and quite a few others have been involved in kind of their own kind of athlete grouping where they wanted to then advise and kind of collaborate with CrossFit with regards to how they can best make the competition and the games safe for everybody, more beneficial for the athletes, because I think a lot of the CrossFit stuff is kind of sworn to secrecy, and you don't really find out information on events, you don't really find out things ahead of time, so you can't necessarily plan for everything. It's kind of is a case of things get sprung on you and then you have to adapt at the last minute to then cope with whatever challenge is thrown your way. And I think for me the biggest thing is that in this kind of event you want to push athletes to the absolute limit. You want to test them as hard as you possibly can and see what the outcomes of that are, but you cannot push them over the edge. If you get into the point where you're actually really risking their safety and the likelihood of someone dying is fairly high, that is a massive problem. So you cannot put athlete safety at risk. Like you say, you mentioned earlier, Chris, that they're not training for the military. They're not training to go into battle. They're not training to fight. They're not planning on risking life and limb. It is literally the sport of fitness. It's not about testing yourself to the point where you die. And I've had a little look. I've got, you mentioned about, they could easily collaborate with other kind of governing bodies or other areas of expertise that relate to this. So World Open Water Swimming have some pretty clear guidelines on this, where they say the ultimate goal is to ensure safety for all participants. Safety plans should be based on local knowledge and expertise. And I'm just kind of cherry picking a few things throughout this, but when it comes to they do make and allow for differences in events when you've got, whether you've got elite swimmers, amateurs, or you've just got kind of everyday type competitors. But some of the key things are swimmers should be, says, potentially visible at all points in the race, which is where I imagine you might then obviously either have a swimming cap, or you might have a buoy attached to someone to the leg where you can tow that. So you've got an idea of where everybody is. You've got to make sure there are no blind spots on the course. If athletes are showing signs of mental impairment, they should be immediately removed from the water, even if they protest. And race officials have the final authority in ensuring safety. So whether the athlete thinks they can carry on or not, if a race official deems that they are at risk, either to themselves or to potentially other people, they get pulled out of the water. There are no ifs or buts. It is a case of you are done. Then they've got guidelines on monitoring the lead pack. They've got situations for monitoring the middle of the pack. It does say that safety personnel can include kayakers, paddlers, surf skiers, or stand-up paddleboarders. So you can have a variety of, you can have a variety of different craft on the water to take care and look after the athletes. Safety personnel should continuously scan the field and be equipped with means of communication and promptly alert swimmers and officials in case of problems and emergencies. All swimmers should be numbered or marked visibly for easy identification during the race. What else have we got here? So things on pre-race safety briefing, mandatory safety equipment, there are water temperature guidelines, there's weather and monitoring response, emergency response plans, communication systems, medical support, post-race safety procedures. So you've got that even after the event, you've then got to allow for medical evaluation, necessary care, and make sure that participants appropriately recover from either the exertion or just the general exposure to the to the event or the circumstances. And again, the key bit for me here is that the race officials have the final say on whether you continue or not. So again, if an athlete is in any sort of distress or any sort of struggle, that's it. They're pulled out of the water. That's it. They're done. And I don't know whether they've been told in the briefing of, like, if the lifeguards have been told, do not intervene unless you are asked to help. That is completely backwards. That is the opposite of what the requirements are with regards to World Open Water Swimming. So all you can say is that they've got to learn from it and move on. But at the end of the day, someone died. I mean, what do you think about, because they carried on with the games after this? What do you think to that situation, Chris?
Yeah.
Right. We lost Chris a little bit again then. Chris, what do you make to the fact to them carrying on with the CrossFit Games? What's your thoughts on that, and what would you have done as a competitor?
I can kind of see why they did it. My personal opinion is that it's wrong and that they shouldn't have done it. I agree with this whole memorial thing and coming together and grieving together and being like a community, etc., and being a network to grieve together and stuff. But I suspected that they would carry it on. But my personal opinion is that they should have turned it into a memorial games which was non-competitive. So it's not like, oh, there's still going to be prize money for the person that wins, etc. It should have just been memorial games in memory of Lazar, which I know they said they were doing. Prize money goes to him. It's rather than being competitive, it should have been what they said they were trying to do rather than going out and competing against each other. I think it should just been like they ditched whatever events they had planned and they did some communal workouts. Anyone can get involved. They can have a good time and do the morning that they said they were going to do rather than doing a big fucking high level competition. I also think that from what I hear, there was a meeting whereby the directing staff discussed what they were going to do. They decided they were going to carry on. Then they told the athletes, and the athletes wanted some input. And obviously, at that stage, it's already been decided. All you need is a few athletes on board. To be honest, I think all it should have taken at that stage is one athlete to be like, yeah, no, I don't think it's right. At the end of the season, if one athlete out of the 80 goes, you know what, this ain't right, I'm not competing, I want to like do whatever I need to do to grieve, whether it's together, alone, what have you. I think if one person was against it, that's it. It shouldn't have continued the way it did. And the reason that I think that is because, and I think a lot of the athletes had this thought as well, and it looks like it's now coming out from a lot of people. I saw Pat Vellner's post that carrying on was kind of a way of saying, yeah, deaths are going to happen in this sport, and it's almost in a way normalizing it. So it's like, okay, yeah, someone died at the CrossFit Games once. It could happen again. Whereas I don't think that should be the case. I think it should be an absolute, I know it's still an abnormality, but rather than, like you said, your sport doesn't care about you. He has become a statistic. He's one person that died at the CrossFit Games. That is the statistic. And the sport just carried on without him. Like, and the changes were minimal, really. Some people were sad while competing. Some people were confused while competing. Like they kept saying, "Oh yeah, there's no right or wrong answer here." Like I think if it's not a right answer, it's a wrong answer.
Yeah. I mean, I think from my situation on that is, when they say, oh, well, we're going to carry on, because we're a community, we'll grieve together, we'll do this, we'll do that. Like to me, I look at that and go, you're part of the reason this has happened. Like, if anything, I'm looking at this from the outside in going, it's your fault. Don't be putting me in a situation where everything's
Yeah.
compromised because you failed to look after us. And there have been other examples. I think Fikowski mentioned this on his um, Instagram. Like they've had a group of athletes have got together to try and talk about situations where they've been at risk, injury risk has been high, exposure to heat, and they were trying to get clarity on, because it's being held in Texas in sort of like the middle of summer when it's going to be stinking hot. They're trying to get clarity on how many events are outside, what's the distance and duration of the events, what's the nature of the events, what's the percentage of the events that are going to be indoors in the air conditioner in the air conditioning. Is like, how necessary is it for someone to go out and acclimatize? And if like, we might do a separate podcast on this, but the effects of acclimatization and how that impacts the body and your physiology, and the knock-on effects of it. So it's huge. You're asking athletes to then make a decision of like, oh, do I go and spend all the additional money either traveling early or going acclimatizing somewhere else, especially if they're already in a cold climate? How much do they need to go and put into making sure they're, well conditioned and appropriately set up for the event? Like, it's a lack of clarity on the preparation required. And that's part of the problem. And then there have been other circumstances where I think you mentioned about they were asked to perform like really heavy, either 1 rep max sort of snatches, clean and jerks, or back squats or something on what was essentially a wooden platform outdoors in the rain. I mean, asking someone to do anything near maximal weight on a slippy wooden floor is just crazy. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you are asking for trouble. You are flirting with danger, and you are teasing out the inevitable. You're actually helping it along the way. So, I mean, my point of view is like, this should have been taken out of the hands of CrossFit. Like, I think if this was to have happened in the UK, I would have been like, why aren't the police there? Why isn't the event being investigated? Because clearly someone is culpable. Like, for this to happen and for you to not recover the body for about 2 hours, someone is culpable. Like there are things that have gone significantly wrong, not just slightly sideways, massively wrong, for you to essentially lose an athlete and have no idea where they are in a lake 30 meters from the finish when other people in the crowd have seen it happen. They've seen him going under, they've seen him struggling, and you've got people on paddleboards and kayaks right alongside him doing what? And this is what, like, this actually really pissed me off. And I'd be interested to know what you think about where CrossFit goes next from this. Like, do you think there will be a bit of an exodus of the elite competitors? Will there be a breakaway competition where, the likes of some of the top athletes now actually put together their own games and their own testing methods for, the sport of fitness? Or do you think CrossFit carries on and, they might make a few changes around HQ and juggle people around and move people out of the picture? What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the point. That, like, the sport will go on as it is. I think they will make some changes. In terms of, I think they'll probably get this group of athletes, they'll get some kind of athlete board where they can, help get that kind of information, the relevant information beforehand. But otherwise, it will go on as it was. And it's just something unfortunate that happened. The sport, I think it was fighting to become, it's obviously huge in terms of CrossFit is known globally, but CrossFit and CrossFit, the sport and the competition and stuff, are two separate entities now. And the sport they believe was dying anyway. A lot of the top athletes are now getting older and moving away from it. I think because of the size of CrossFit, the sport, I don't think the athletes would be able to get big enough to launch something that would be a fitness test that would be bigger than it. CrossFit was struggling for funding anyway. I don't think the business was struggling for money, but I think it was struggling for funding in terms of, like paying staff and stuff like that to actually be manning the games. So I think it will just carry on as normal because that's kind of what the business is designed to do. They encounter issues and then they just move on. They'll probably have, maybe Brent Fikowski on a board and he will help make some decisions that will protect some of the athletes. But ultimately, whilst it's a lovely change, it's after Lazar Djukic has died. One of the top athletes, one of the elite athletes. He was 28. He was younger than me. He's a young lad. He's died because of the negligence. It's too late. No matter, yeah, I get it. They like for it to go on, they have to make the changes now. But it's just, I'd be looking at like, what the fuck, man? What the actual fuck? These are obvious things that should be in place. And, like Dave Castro, like obviously very clever, like, but he was a Navy SEAL. Like he's a very, very competent man. You would suspect that they would have shit in place for stuff like this and it wouldn't have to be an issue. But, you know, it is. And I think that's the sad thing. This is it. I mean, it all comes back to your sport doesn't care about you. At the end of the day, it is a business. There is a lot of money involved. And I'm not saying that they are money grabbing because I certainly don't think that's the case. They paid their athletes and they'll have there's obviously been a fund set up for Lazar's family, but it's a business and it's just a statistic now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll be remembered every now and then, like, but that's it.
Yeah. And I think the fundamental point that you made there is that the sport will carry on, the games will carry on, the business itself will go on. And ultimately, I think that that's the same in every single sport. Like that's the nature of it. It doesn't matter what happens, people will always participate. Um, so just with regards to the statement that I put out of your sport doesn't care about you, I've had a few responses to that, so I will read them out. Taylor Shortland, he says, true, performance is all that matters. One of my kickers, Billy Hewitt, he says, I'm out of a job. I'm injured. I'm out of a job. Coaches have a guy. I'm out of a job. It's not easy. And that's true. It's the nature of the business. Like if someone comes along who's better, you just get moved on. Luke Neal says it's basically it's the same as your job and your faith. Like they repay you in other ways for your dedication, but they can't care about you. Um, Axel Allez Le Bleu, one of my Titans teammates, same as your job, it doesn't care. So when you give more than you get, it's okay to walk away. And I think like that is difficult, knowing when to walk away. That is part of the trick. Sam Fraser, 100% correct. Teams have a short memory, and once you've moved on, they won't remember you. Cassian Graham, sports a business. You earn the money. You have value. The moment you don't earn the money, you fall behind. Um, Dave Gibbs, yep, you can love it all you want, but it doesn't love you back. Never will. I can't read this one out. Jamie Stewart, he just wants to be a Tiddlywinks champion. Um, and then quite a few others that I'm not going to go into, but I did get a very interesting one from Will Hobbs, which I will read out because it's a little bit of a longer justification. I think it's actually this is the way that I think about it, and I think this is the way that it's important for you two thinking about it. So yes, it can't care about you, but the people in it, the memories, the successes, the failures, the locker room chats, the weddings of teammates and coaches, the bonds that you make with each other and the people that you do it with, like that's a lifetime thing. Like that will always last. Like the travels that you go on, like if you go on international trips, if you go compete in national finals, things like the big events. Then you've also got the knowledge and the skills that you gain from it. And he says all of that has been worth the broken bones, missed nights out, early mornings, late nights. He says, I'm sure I've already got arthritis in my thumb and my rib needs warming up every day when I wake up, but my brain is getting to more closely resemble mashed potato, but it's been a hell of a ride. And without sport, I'd have been lost. It gave me highs and lows, but I wouldn't trade those highs for anything. And I think that's the appropriate way to finish this. You have the choice. It is always a choice. If you want to participate, you participate. If you don't, that's fine. Walk away. It's always your choice. It's always your decision.
Absolutely. And I think, do you know, like at the end of the day, it is a tragedy. And, it could have been someone else. Someone else could have dropped a barbell on the head and it could have quite easily died. Like these things certainly can happen, but you would just expect that things are in place. The things that need to be in place are in place in order to stop these eventualities. And one thing that I want to ask you that I think I'd be intrigued to hear your answer on. What do you think to obviously quite a few names obviously decided to step out? They decided that they weren't going to compete. They were there to do it in memoriam and as an exhibition. A lot of people decided to stand on the start line for a minute before they went in. Some teams withdrew, some big names withdrew. Laura Horvath withdrew, and a few others did. What do you think in terms of the psychology of these athletes that have, some withdrew, some decided to stay? It's like, is there any point in winning that games? Do you feel like some people have withdrawn, you've stayed, you've done it, you've won? Have you really won? Do you feel psychologically? Like I just think it's I know they train to the point where they're good at dealing with the trauma on their body and the stress on their body, but they don't train to that capacity where they have to deal with someone fucking dying.
No.
like they don't. And competing for the next 2-3 days afterwards, they're in fucking tears. They're crying on the start lines and at the finish lines.
I
I just think
think
a huge after effect, a knock-on effect of it. And
I think it's very difficult. I think like sitting in my chair right now, looking at the situation and analyzing everything that's going on. There's the vast majority of me thinks there is absolutely no way I would have anything. I would remove myself completely from the sport. I would renounce it, and I would convince every single person on planet Earth that it is a terrible way to go. If I was involved in anything like that, that's the way that I'm thinking about it and looking at it and feeling about it now, as just someone who's looking in from the sidelines. Now, I think it's very difficult to gauge how you'd feel and what you'd do unless you're actually in that situation in terms of how you respond to it. I think I get it. from both angles. Like for the people that have the psychopathic mindset of we carry on, it's what we do, we keep going, and almost that militant mindset of like, yeah, one of my buddies has died, but this is what we're here for. This is the job. This is what we do. This is the task. I can see that way of approaching it, and I get it. However, I also understand that there's like we're all human at the end of the day, and the human side of it is like, he's a friend, he was a fellow competitor. It could have been any one of us. These people have put us at risk. It's not right. It's not appropriate. I'm done. And I think it's very difficult to necessarily pick which you could choose which one you'd want to be. You could choose the kind of like which one of those two brackets you would want to fall into. But is it necessarily going to be the reality? Are you necessarily going to fall into the one you think you would? Like, it's a difficult one. I think unless you're actually in that situation, it's very difficult to make a judgment on the way that someone's reacted. So I've got no, I have no bearings on, for the likes of Tia Claire Toomey, who I think she carried on, or any of the other athletes that did continue, because you're essentially fighting your own battles as well. Like, you've trained for your entire life. It might be a big payday. You've got family and friends and coaches who've come along to watch you, supported you all that time. Like, they want to see you compete. Again, like, is it necessarily true that they would want you to carry on? Would they want it after what's happened? Would they want you to continue to put yourself at risk? Difficult to
Yeah.
say, again, unless you're in that situation. But from both sides of the coin, I get it. I see it. I understand it. I empathize. And I also understand it if anyone's got any judgments on any of the particular athletes, or it's particularly turned them away from someone that they used to hold in very high regard. I think, that's fair enough. You're allowed that opinion. You're allowed to think about them that way.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I don't particularly.
We've lost Chris again. He doesn't particularly think or do something. Let's find out. Chris, you don't particularly what?
I don't particularly like my internet today. I don't particularly hold contempt against any of the athletes that chose to stay or chose to leave. Like that, I do agree with. People will choose to stay, people will choose to leave. It's totally up to them and where they stand on it. One thing that I do think is CrossFit had a reputation anyway, and anyone outside of the CrossFit circle looking in, just ask them what they think. Strength and conditioning coaches ask them what they think about CrossFit. Loads of people think it's a bag of shite and it's stupid and it's how you get injured. It is also now how you get killed without them caring about you. So I think it's fucking terrible. And the fact that event one, heat one, event one, it's a fucking nightmare, isn't it? Do you recall? I won't waste too much more time, but I can't remember how many years ago. It must be about 5 to 10 years ago now, where they did a lake swim, and then a load of the athletes had to pull out because they'd become ill from taking in some of the water from the lake when they'd been told that water was not healthy to swim in and they should not swim in it.
Oh no, I don't remember that. Where was that?
Yeah, I'll have to find that one for you. I'll find that one and bring it up for another time. But
It's like in the Olympics with the athletes swimming in the River Seine that was just full of like I find it remarkable that you could have the pinnacle of that sport. Athletes have trained for 4 years as a cycle, and possibly 4 years plus through their lifetime to be able to compete in that environment, and you put them in a river full of shit. You've got to
yeah,
be kidding me. Like, there has to be something better. We have to be better than that. I mean, you could get into all kinds of government policies about water pollution and things like that, but it's just, again, you're exposing athletes to dangerous situations and dangerous circumstances when you can't do that. You've got to look after them. You have to look after your athletes.
yeah. Or you make it very, very clear that it is the kind of event where, you're probably not going to be looked after. And, there'll be people out there who are more than willing to go and give shit a go, even though there is an extreme side to it. But that's not what CrossFit identify themselves as being. That's not what the sports side identify themselves as being. They want to make themselves, this is what CrossFit sports trying to do. They want to make themselves science-based and become like a top elite sport that people look up to and is televised and they can pay their athletes appropriately. That's what they're trying to aim towards. So stuff like this is kind of where you look at it and go, well, yeah, they're not fucking there yet. I don't know if you've ever watched any of the events, Alex, but the commentators frequently say about like they're trying to improve their broadcasting and improve the commentating and make it so that people can understand what the fuck is going on, because it's very often very hard to follow. Like you don't know who's winning, who's second, who's third, what the fuck they're doing. You don't understand how people win. It just shows that they are, and this is the thing, they're an entity that are learning. So mistakes will be made, but if you want to be known as a sport like that, you got to be look after your athletes exactly like you said, or introduce yourself as an extreme sport whereby people, shit will happen and they don't have things to come in and save you. Have you ever heard of Grid League? Grid League is like the extreme of CrossFit, where they do fucking crazier shit than CrossFit at twice the speed. Like, go do that. Go be part of that if you're not going to look after people.
Like what kind of stuff do they do?
They will have events where, first of all, it's like watching CrossFit but on 5 times speed. They will do. Do you know what a round off is?
No.
A gymnastic movement. They might have like 20 round offs into say 15 ring butterfly muscle ups. But if you've ever seen them, so in CrossFit, they'll have muscle ups where they do kipping ring muscle ups, which is where obviously you use kinetic chain, you use lower body into upper body, etc. The butterfly is where you go from the top position straight down through into the bottom and kind of do the kip in one movement to get yourself all the way up again. It's a more extreme, faster version, a way to chain faster ones together, I guess. Or they'll do like a reverse version, or they'll do skin the cats on the rings, which is obviously where you rotate through your shoulders. So you might do like a front flip on the rings, hold on to the bars, and then you'll have to do like 10 back flips and then 10 burpees over a bar and then like 10 thrusters. I don't know. It's a more extreme version with more extreme exercises. You know, when you see these silly videos of people doing wall ball burpees and shit like that.
Yeah.
Great. These guys are serious. Like they're freaks. You watch it and like, holy shit. That is outrageous that people could do that.
Well, I'm looking at I'm looking at a video now on their Instagram where they've got a couple of lads who are doing 50-pound, they call them soft stones, to a 10-foot target. So that's reasonably heavy. That's decent weight. It does look like another version of CrossFit, but it's like, is it like more of a team relay thing?
Yeah.
Less about the individual.
Yeah.
They're moving some heavy weight, so
Oh yeah, they are very much based on CrossFit. It's just a more extreme version. Like they will do more stuff, heavier, faster, bigger. It's just not as big because it's therefore also more dangerous and crazier. And it's generally obviously shorter duration as well.
interesting. I'd be interested to know if like CrossFit would actually consider going into a more formalized format where, like, the decathlon at the Olympics is 10 events, or you got the heptathlon where you're doing 7, and it's a set event and it's basically designed to test who is the best all-round athlete, which is essentially what CrossFit is. What I don't understand is why they don't come up with a stricter format that says, right, we're going to have a running / speed event. We're going to have a swimming speed event. We're going to test who is the best athlete at various different things. and then throw in a couple of mixed modality tasks to then cover off kind of the more particular CrossFit type vibes of it, where you could then do, well, we're going to be doing like running combined with weightlifting, or we're going to do some heavy lifting mixed with some heavy carries and various other things. And I just think that if they refined it and kind of simplified, rather than focusing on being included, but rather than focusing on including loads of novel exercises and novel tasks, like things that are just completely seemingly random but are different every single time, why not just have a more structured event where things are a little bit more similar and you're actually testing to see who's the best athlete in those circumstances? I don't know whether that would be more appealing or less appealing. Like for me personally, I've loved watching the decathlon. I've loved watching the heptathlon. I love watching people run fast, throw far, jump high, jump long. Those kinds of things is just like to see that and be able to manage that and see that structured in that way. I think that would be a beneficial way to go. And you could still include all the CrossFit components, the weightlifting, the gymnastics, the swimming, the running, the random task stuff where if they're doing mountain biking or whatever it is you want, like include the kayaking or, a random different sport. But then I think if you are going to do that, you need to make sure you're following the guidelines from that sport to ensure that everybody is safe and is participating correctly. And that would mean if you had a kayak type event, you bring in people who are kayak specialists to help you run the event. You don't just go, oh, well, this is the kind of thing that we want to do. This is how I think we're going to do it. And we'll just see what happens. Like, I think you have to be more detailed and strict and rely on specific expertise to be able to run the event to the best standard possible. And I think that would be a lot fairer on the athletes and hopefully result in no more situations like Lazar Djukic.
Yeah, in terms of methodology, they do try to keep a level of structure where they have like they always have a run. They'll always have so they always want people to do some kind of running, a swim. Then the issue that they've got is they'll always try and have some kind of repeat so you can track if the athletes are getting fitter, faster, stronger, and then something that is new and novel. And I think that's where the issue lies. That's where they bring in like a new exercise that no one's done before, or mountain biking when no one's mountain bike before, or no one's trained for it, or kayaking. And in the quest for doing this new thing, that's where you're going to get people who, unfortunately are going to struggle with it. Like if you bring in a fucking swim and no one's swam before, yeah, they do swimming every year, so it's a different one. But let's say kayaking, you're gonna come across issues unless, like you said, you do have, if it is kayaking, people that do like both ends of the both extremes of the spectrum of kayaking, and they have the regulations in place that are required.
Anyway, I think what we'll do, I know we were going to talk about potentially which Olympic sports need changing and what we would do, but I don't think it would be like given the season, we've just slated CrossFit Games for carrying on because, after one of their athletes has died, so one of their athletes after Lazar has died, I think we'd be in the same boat if we just carried on and completely flipped topic and finished on a light-hearted note. So if you are hoping for the Olympic sports side of things, tune into the next episode because that's when we'll break that down. We'll go into a bit of a detail, a massive shift in gear from what we've spoken about this week, which has been, I think, imagine a pretty tough time for everyone that's associated with CrossFit. Anyone that cares about sports and athleticism will understand this and the precarious situation that we put ourselves in as athletes. Coaches have to go through this. Coaches have to understand all this. Organizations and governing bodies certainly need to take on board the lessons to be learned. I think even just from simple things like footballers collapsing of a heart attack on the pitch, circumstances around training, nutrition, hydration, athlete care, urgent medical attention, all that kind of stuff has changed, and we can only ever learn from it and get better at it. But we almost need to just think ahead and mitigate any of those circumstances before there is an issue in the first place. So I feel like it'd be only right for us to wrap it up there, and we will move on and come back with another episode where we completely flip topic. Chris, is there anything else that you want to add for today?
No, I think everyone has done a wonderful job so far today. It's beautiful and sunny outside, so make sure you go and enjoy your August the 14th.
Yes, let's go and do some dog training. By the way, it's not going to be August 14th when they listen to this. It's going to be way down the line. Like the 23rd, 24th, maybe.
Well, they better have enjoyed their August the 14th then.
It's just because we're way ahead of schedule. In fact, actually, I'll send this episode out earlier because it's a bit more appropriate and relevant. Anyway, guys, thank you very, very much for tuning in. This has been episode 113 of the Lenko Show, where we talk all things health, performance, and sports related mindset, healthcare, all of it, any of it. We want it all. Hopefully, you've enjoyed listening to us, and we will speak to you again soon. Lenko out.
Goodbye.